Our American democracy is at stake. It has served as a model for nations throughout the world, yet we should recognize that there is no assurance that it'll last forever. We have a responsibility as citizens to support the integrity of the American democracy, and we can take significant steps forward by promoting ethical leadership. It's time for the LeaderEthics Wisconsin podcast. Our first guest is Lee Rasch, the Executive Director of LeaderEthics Wisconsin. He's a former college president with extensive public speaking experience on various facets of leadership. So, Lee, what is LeaderEthics Wisconsin?
Well, thanks for the opportunity to chat about this, Bob. LeaderEthics Wisconsin is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization that's committed to promoting ethical leadership among elected officials. We believe that there are 4 principles that define ethical leaders. They're truthful, they're transparent with public information, they're unifiers rather than dividers, and they work to the best of their ability to represent their entire constituency. And as such, we don't believe ethical leadership is tied to any particular political party or even to any particular legislative policy, because an ethical leader can approach those things following those principles and have options on how they can demonstrate it. And so LeaderEthics Wisconsin is there to bring about increased awareness and the need for this in our elected leaders.
Then tell me, who is Lee Rasch?
Well, you know, I lived in the Chicago area for a number of years, and prior to coming to La Crosse, I worked at a large community college in the suburbs. It was a good college in many ways, but it was not founded on what I would call ethical principles. They lacked integrity in some of their hiring practices and their marketing practices. And it was really the catalyst for me coming up to La Crosse in 1989. And I assumed the role of president at Western Technical College. And what I realized is that many of the practices that I brought with me to Western were practices that I learned in suburban Chicago. And so I actually spent several years trying to unlearn things that I had been doing in the past and learn things in a new way that I felt was better reflecting what the college needed and what I needed to demonstrate. And so those are things that I worked on over the years in an effort to be a more character-based and a servant leader in practice.
Lee, what's the difference between leadership and servant leadership and ethical leadership?
I think the terms are somewhat interchangeable in my view. Those 4 principles are critical for not just in the political world, but they're really the kinds of things that ethical leaders, servant leaders follow in practice in business, education, healthcare, services. And so those are the things we're trying to promote as expectations for elected leaders. Think of it this way. If you are buying a service or a product from a local company, you expect that company will operate with ethical leadership. If your school, where your kids go, has an administrator there, you expect that person to be an ethical leader. Now, people don't always deliver to the level that you hope, but there's an effort and an expectation that they would. So the question we would ask, why don't we carry those same expectations in the political arena? And those are the things we're trying to talk about in LeaderEthics Wisconsin.
Give me an example of one of the member events, Lee.
Well, each chapter holds a member event quarterly. I think one good example would be Brian Brewed, a vice president at Darrell and Power Cooperative, who was also a former president of the state senate in Wisconsin. His topic was countering political tribalism. And that's an important topic today, because the more we become partisan in our beliefs, then the farther we are away from being able to unify our efforts and to represent our entire constituency. So it was a really good presentation. There was a lot of good interaction. And it was good to hear from someone who's been there, who's done that.
What's your goal for LeaderEthics Wisconsin, Lee?
You know, the goal is, more than anything else, it is getting citizen involvement in raising the expectation that our ethical leaders, our elected leaders, can be ethical leaders. And, we provide a citizen's guide for 2020 is something that we've shared with our members because we want them to realize there are big things and small things they can do. In the state of North Dakota, for example, the state is dominated by one political party. And in fact, they're ranked very low nationally in terms of transparency. A group of citizens, they call themselves the badass grandmas. They took upon themselves to start a process to pass a new constitutional amendment that would improve transparency and implement an ethics commission. Now, they were outspent more than 10 to 1 in that effort. This was in 2018. And yet the legislation passed. And it shows that when citizens take it upon themselves to do the right thing, they can produce really good results. So we want to share those stories with our members.
How is the pandemic telling of who is ethical and who is not ethical in the political arena?
Well, the pandemic is really calling out the importance of ethical leadership. I mean, think of it this way. What do we need at a time when we're facing a threat? It's not a partisan threat. It's a threat that's affecting potentially all of us. So we need to look at those 4 principles. We need ethical leaders at the federal and state and local level who are truthful. They're giving us straight information. We need leaders who are transparent with public information. And this is particularly difficult because in a pandemic like this, the conditions may be rapidly changing. And so it's difficult to present something as accurate information, knowing that it might evolve and change in a short period of time. But ethical leaders can be straightforward in how they present things and do the best they can in that transparency. It's really important that we are unifying at this time. We should not be trying to divide our perspectives into political and partisan views. We really need to represent the needs of the entire country or state in this effort. And of course, that means representing our entire constituency in the process and not taking sides or singling out groups for favorable treatment or blaming. And so at this time, in a pandemic, we really need ethical leaders to shine.
So why would somebody want to become a member of LeaderEthics Wisconsin?
Well, first of all, membership allows you to be a part of the effort. And it's a simple process. If you go to our website, leaderethicswi.org, on the homepage, there's a button that says join. And you press that button and you can follow the steps and you can become a member. It's a very affordable effort, $25 a year. In fact, if you're age 23 or younger, it's $10 a year. And our goal is to be as accessible for all citizens, not just those that have money. But by becoming a member, you get a monthly newsletter called the Ethics Report, where we give examples of good ethical leadership in practice and some examples that are not so good. We invite you to those quarterly chapter events. And we also give every chapter an opportunity to hold a candidate development workshop, and as such, try to develop the next generation of ethical leaders, starting with local school boards or city council. So those are things that happen if you become a member of LeaderEthics Wisconsin, and it gives you a chance to be a part of that process.
Why is it only $25 to join?
We had a lot of discussion on this, and it was a conscious decision by the board and the organization to make engagement in LeaderEthics Wisconsin as available and as affordable for everyone. And we didn't want to have funds coming from private organizations or individuals that would raise questions about who's pulling the strings on this effort. We want this to be something that is citizen-led and grassroots in every way.
Do you think it's possible to change expectations with LeaderEthics Wisconsin?
Well, we're not naive about this. We understand that the challenges are huge. But if we stay persistent with this, we think over time we can make that difference. I think back to an example of when I was a freshman in college, when I was sitting in psychology class, and I had a portable ashtray in my left hand, and I was chain smoking cigarettes. And I wasn't the only one. There were others in the class too. In fact, the air was blue. And when you think of that image today, it just seems so foreign. But, the change in that expectation didn't happen in one piece of legislation. It didn't happen in 1 year. It happened in lots of ways, at the legislative level, at the organizational level, over many years. And we think if we stay persistent with this and we continue to have the conversation come up consistently in many different communities, over time, yes, we can bring about the change and we can see better, more ethical leadership in the political area.
I know you've heard it. We love our country, but we don't trust our government. LeaderEthics Wisconsin is looking to change that. For more information, visit their website, leaderethicswi.org. The LeaderEthics Wisconsin podcast is a podcastforhire.com production.